Welcome to the latest edition of the West Tokyo JALT podcast series. I'm your usual host, Jason Pratt. I'm joined with a room full of really cool people. It's possible that they'll speak up during this, and there's no objection, but let's see what happens. Anyways, I'm with Jennifer, who just spoke on neurodiversity in the EFL classroom. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you mind introducing yourself a bit before my battery dies?
Sure. Yep, so my name is Jennifer Yphantides, and I've been working in Japan since 2004. I mostly work in universities, and I've been at Kanda. I was at Kanda for 5 years, and then ICU for 5 years, and now I work at Soka University in Hachioji. Basically, my research interest is about women and other minorities working in EFL, particularly in EMI programs. But I also really like to present on neurodiversity because there's a lot of neurodiversity in my family. So as a secondary researcher, I've come to talk about that subject today.
Excellent. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this has kind of been a dream presentation for me for quite some time. Before I even knew about you, I was hoping to learn more about this subject. I've been inspired because since being an educator in university, I've come across a lot of students that I felt I wasn't giving the best support to. When I was a student myself, I think I didn't focus on that. I focused on my own experience. But being in the educator seat, I've come to want to help everyone to have the same experience that I'm trying to get across on their own, shall I say, their own basis to meet their specific needs. And thanks to the teaching gods that be, I came across you and we were able to get you out here. I think everyone who joined this presentation had a lot of learning going on. But could you tell the people who weren't able to attend briefly what you talked about today?
Yep, sure. So today I divided the presentation. I tried to divide it into two sections. The first is like frequently asked questions about neurodiversity, about particularly autism and ADHD. So these are questions that teachers have asked me over the last couple of years, and I think because I'm answering those questions a lot, I thought it would be helpful in front of a group to talk about them. And the other part of the presentation is more practitioner oriented, where I talk about some of the things that I'm doing in class or visions that I have that I'm hoping also to build in my own classrooms and ways that I'm trying to work with my students. And as I talk about these things, I realize there's so many barriers standing in the way, and that, nothing is going to be perfect, but that, hopefully I'm trying to move in a certain direction. And I think, apart from my presentation, what I'd really like to say is how happy I've been because, I have presented at JOLT before, but nobody ever emailed me afterwards, or nobody ever asked me for anything follow-up. And this is the one presentation that I've ever done that people seem to be really interested in. And actually this week, I got an email from a researcher in Austria who saw, this JOLT presentation on my ResearchGate profile and asked questions about it. And I was just so shocked because it seems to me now that people are really, really interested in this. And I didn't think they would be. And I thought the main attitude was it's not our responsibility to deal with students that are different from others. Our responsibility is language teachers or content teachers or what be it. But I'm so impressed with teachers that come out on a Saturday night that are so dedicated to helping all of their students, not just certain ones.
Absolutely. I had some major takeaways from this presentation. The first being the concept of moving away from thinking of autism or people on the autism spectrum, people with ADHD, as people who have a deficiency, a disease, and as you termed it, a condition, or maybe as we could say, a less common way of how they interact with society and how maybe the wiring, for lack of a better term in my mind, of the brain. People who you said often come with other unique qualities that can be beneficial to whatever the case is, beneficial in their academic careers, beneficial in the workplace and such. So to see people as diverse, as you say in the title of this presentation today, instead of as somebody with a deficiency. And I thought that was a great takeaway. A second takeaway I got was the wrong understanding that people think perhaps this is a condition that's increasing due to things to do with a modern lifestyle. Whereas by various estimates that I've heard in today's presentation, it's much more common and has been much more common throughout history that we've lived together with neurodiverse people. So when we look at the students in the classroom, perhaps it's not that these types of people are more common, thus we are seeing them in our classes more, but either that they have more empowerment to become a student at this level, or a combination of that plus the better ability to understand what people who are neurally diverse are like, and so we can identify better. And the third was the issues of support that you recommended that teachers put forward. And I wonder if you could just touch on some of those key areas of support, because that was probably something that listeners here could easily start to consider how they could do in their environment.
Yeah, I can talk about support for a minute, but I just wanted to address something that you've said. The neurodiversity movement is, is actually in contrast to the people who are supposed to be the specialists in this area. And when the people with these conditions are in control, this is how they present themselves. And, when I look at the second thing that you mentioned, how, one of the commonly asked questions is this going up? And the answer is no. When these so-called specialists, and I'm not poo-pooing everyone, but, when you get people in that have, their own interests and they live in their own times, and could be a very racist time like Asperger's or whatever, when you have those people in control, they really are in control, and they can say, they're like gods, only 8 kids, or 1 in 30, and we're going to kill the ones that, are not Asperger's, that are severe, right? So these are the things that can happen when people that are not in the community are in control of. And when the community people are in control, then you start to see the positive things, right? And in terms of support, again, I do think that support needs to be community-based. It can't be, how can we fit these people into regular classrooms? How can we adjust the classroom so that everybody's included? So, in terms of, a lot of teachers here say, well, everybody has to do the same thing. We can't lower the curriculum. It's not about lowering the curriculum. Most students that are accepted to university, well, all of them, I would assume, don't have intellectual disability. So we're not dealing with intellectual disability here, which, would be a different issue. But again, when you're talking about university students or even high school students, it's not about lowering the bar or, heaven forbid, using the term dumbing it down. It's about accommodations for people so the curriculum is accessible, so that each student in the class has the possibility of achieving their goals or reaching their potential. Now, how that's done, you're asking specifically about accommodations that you can make in the classroom. Have it based on the student, because it's a spectrum, right? And same with ADHD, the way it manifests itself is very different. So what does that individual student need? And what they need changes over time and changes with the context. So it's not like something that's imposed from outside. It's something that's coming from inside, from them. Because, for the first 2 years after my son got diagnosed, I had a checklist next to my bed. How can I get him to do this? How can I get him to do that? Next time I take him to a psychologist, I'm going to win, because he's not going to have anything on the checklist. Who cares if he has anything on the checklist? That doesn't matter to me anymore. What matters is that he's in an inclusive environment where he can reach his potential, and it always does change. What the needs are always do change, so it's never going to be like, I mastered this, I got it. It's a constant, support, just like anybody else in the world. Their needs change, and how they learn changes, and how they interact with the world changes, and they develop, right? It's an issue of development.
Wonderful. So I always struggle with my own selfish nature of wanting to keep my guests forever and the restrictions of time. But today my lack of battery is going to make me be a good person and let you go quickly. But is there anything that you would like to promote through this podcast before we say goodbye?
Actually, I wanted to promote that X reading because I'm really into.
Wonderful.
I'm really into graded readers, and I think it's a wonderful way for students to experience another language and to get really into learning another language. So I would definitely promote that.
So this is a first ever on our podcast series where our next event for January is being promoted by the guest. So I'm really over the moon with this. So X reading looks to be our next topic for January. You've got Jennifer's seal of approval here, so that means you have to come. All right, well, thank you so much for your time, Jennifer.
Thank you so much.
Love having you. Thank you.